Welcome to the AI Brief from the YPO Technology Network. I'm Stephen Forte. Tuesday, June 9th. Let's get into it. Three things happened this weekend, and they are not really three stories. They are one story told three times. Apple, Anthropic, and the President of the United States each looked at artificial intelligence and reached the same conclusion. Nobody thinks they can win this alone anymore. Apple, the most vertically integrated technology company in history, the company that built its own chips, its own operating systems, its own retail stores, its own payment rails, decided it could not build a frontier AI model and licensed one from Google for $1 billion a year. Anthropic published research showing its own models now run full research projects on their own, with engineers shipping 8 times more code per day than 2 years ago, and the president told reporters he wants the government to own stakes in the leading AI companies. Three institutions, one conclusion. Let me take them in order. Start with Apple, because the timing is not a coincidence. Today, Tuesday, June 9th, Apple opens WWDC, Apple's Worldwide Developers Conference, at 10 in the morning Pacific time at Apple Park. Tim Cook, Apple's CEO since 2011, who announced in April that he would hand the role to John Ternus, Apple's hardware engineering chief, who takes over as CEO in September, delivers his final keynote. The headline product he introduces on his way out the door is a completely rebuilt Siri. Here is the part that matters. The new Siri does not run on an Apple model. It runs on a custom 1.2 trillion parameter Gemini model. Gemini is Google's flagship AI model family, licensed from Google at approximately $1 billion per year. This has been independently confirmed by Bloomberg's Mark Gurman, by TechCrunch, by McRumors, and by 9to5Mac, iOS 27, which Apple describes internally as a snow leopard release, a reference to a 2009 Mac operating system update focused purely on performance and stability with no headline features. Drops its developer betas today, and the iPhone 11 is dropped from support. The deal has one clause I want you to hold on to. Google's contract explicitly prevents it from using Apple Siri queries to train future Gemini models. That clause has been verified by an ACM conference paper published this month. Why does a YPO member care which company's model powers a voice assistant? Because this is the largest AI distribution deal in history by any reasonable measure, and because of what it tells you about build versus buy. Consider the inversion. Google currently pays Apple roughly $20 billion a year to be the default search engine across Apple's 2 billion active devices. Now flip it. Apple is paying Google $1 billion a year to put Google's model inside Siri. The most powerful distributor in consumer technology is writing a check to a supplier it could not replace. And think about who is making that decision. Apple has spent 5 years and tens of billions of dollars trying to build capable AI in-house. It has $400 billion in cash and arguably the most disciplined engineering culture on the planet. And it concluded that frontier model development cannot compete in-house with buying at scale. If Apple buys, the bar for you to build is very high. But the clause is the part I actually want you to notice. Apple insisted that Google cannot use Siri queries to train Gemini, and Google agreed. It exists because Apple's lawyers understood something most enterprise buyers have not yet demanded in writing. Every interaction your employees have with an AI vendor's model is potentially training data for that vendor's next model. So here's my question. What does your own AI vendor agreement say about training rights on your proprietary interactions? If you are renewing an AI contract this quarter or signing a new one, this clause is now table stakes. Demand it. In writing, your competitive interactions, your strategic queries, your operational workflows, none of that should feed someone else's next training run. Second story, over the weekend, Anthropic, the AI lab behind the Claude models, published new research titled When AI Builds Itself on its institute website. The numbers are worth your attention. Claude agents are now running open research projects end to end. Given an open problem in AI safety, they were, in Anthropic's words, left to solve it without a human in the loop. Claude's success rate on open-ended tasks reached 76% in May 2026, up 50 percentage points in 6 months. And engineers at Anthropic are merging 8 times more code per day than in 2024 because Claude writes the code while the engineer directs and reviews. The central claim is this, quote, a 100-person company can increasingly do the work of a 1,000-person one, because each employee will sit atop a pyramid of agents. Let me pull the business signal out: 76% on open-ended tasks in May, up 50 points in 6 months. If that rate holds, autonomous task success crosses 90% before the end of this year. And 90% is the threshold that matters, the point at which you can restructure a team around supervising agents rather than executing tasks yourself. 8 times more code per day per engineer is not a productivity improvement. It is a change in what the job is. The engineer who used to merge 10 pull requests a week now merges 80, but she is not writing 80 times more code. She is reviewing, directing, and approving it. The skill that gets promoted is judgment, not production, and that applies to far more roles than software engineering. Now, that 100 to 1,000 claim deserves scrutiny. Anthropic wrote it, which means it is marketing as much as research. But the direction is sound, and even a smaller multiple rewrites your org chart. So the right question for your leadership team this week: what does our organization look like when each knowledge worker manages 5 agents instead of 1? Do we have the systems to know if the work is good and the governance to know if it is safe? That is not a 2027 question. It is this year's question. Third story, this one moves from the boardroom to Washington. On Friday, President Trump told reporters aboard Air Force One that he is, quote, interested in the government acquiring stakes in leading AI companies. He described it as almost like a partnership with the American public, and said he plans to meet with AI executives as early as this week. At the same time, a top White House AI policy advisor announced he will leave his post at the end of June. Separately, the Chinese AI lab DeepSeek, the lab whose model releases back in January triggered the single largest single-day stock market loss in U.S. history, is preparing to raise approximately $7.4 billion to fund model development and infrastructure. Here is the read: sovereign equity in private AI companies would be a real departure from how the U.S. government has historically related to the technology sector. If it happens in any form, equity stakes, preferred access, audit rights, board observers, it changes the counterparty risk calculus for any company using those vendors. Your AI vendor's other shareholder would be the U.S. government, which means data access requests, export restrictions, and political pressure become vendor supply chain risks in a way they were not before. And put the DeepSeek raise next to it. China's leading lab is raising $7.4 billion from what are almost certainly state-aligned sources. The capital Cold War in AI is accelerating, and the vendor decisions you make this year carry geopolitical implications they did not 3 years ago. That is worth a board conversation before your next AI contract renewal, not after. So pull the 3 threads together. Apple buys the model, Anthropic proves the productivity multiplier, Washington wants a seat at the table. My read: the era in which AI was a technology decision is over. It is now a strategy decision, a legal decision, and in some cases, a geopolitical one. Apple's $1 billion Gemini deal is a public admission from the most valuable consumer technology company in history that frontier model development is a utility you buy, not a capability you build. Anthropic's research is a proof point that organizational design is about to change faster than most leadership teams are planning for. And Washington's interest in AI equity stakes signals that the people who write the regulations and issue the contracts want a different kind of relationship with the companies building this technology. For those listening on Tuesday morning, the week starts with Apple's keynote, live at 10 in the morning Pacific. Watch it, not because you need to care about iOS 27, but because Tim Cook's last act as CEO was to stand in front of the world and say that even Apple could not do this alone. That is the most important business signal of the quarter. 2 actions for your desk this week. First, if you have any AI vendor contract up for renewal this year, add language requiring that your proprietary interactions cannot be used to train the vendor's models. The Apple-Google clause is your template. Get it in before the renewal. It is much harder to add after. Second, ask your team. If our most productive knowledge worker manages 5 agents instead of 1, does our measurement and governance infrastructure support that? If the answer is no, that is the highest priority AI investment you have right now, not a new model subscription, not another pilot. The infrastructure to know whether the work is good and whether it is safe. That is the YPO Tech Network AI Brief. for Tuesday, June 9th. I am Stephen Forte. If this was useful, send it to a fellow member. I will be back Wednesday with more. Until then, stay sharp.